Good morning. On behalf of the Council of ISL, I would like to invite Professor Priyan Dias and Engineer Nisanka Vijayaratna and Mr. Sarat Jaman as key speakers for today's program, as well as the Council members, past presidents, uh, Executive Secretary of the ISL, and the Program Chair, Professor Navagomu. It is my great pleasure that I am here with you today to the program on the World Anti-Corruption Day. So I think it is very important that we discuss about the corruption, because as a country, recently we went on a bankrupt, but we have been looking at different angles. I think one of the main thing that we discuss about the corruption. Even the recent IMF report summary, it say that the situation of the country might continue until 2028, unless otherwise we reduce the level of corruption and the law and order, as well as the investment on the looking at the return on investment. These are the, as I remember, main three things that we see in the IMF report. Again, we as engineers always say that for the development of any nation, engineering become a most important area that we should concentrate. But that simply say that there is a lot of room for those who are practicing engineers can, while doing the development, go toward the corruption. But we understand that if we go toward the corruption, that we will end up with the similar situation. As I have been in the academy as well as the government as a secretary, I always hear that we blame corruption and very easily we point our fingers toward the politician. I did the same. But after working close to 3 years as a government sector, but I have little changed the way I was thinking. Sometimes I felt like we are here today thanks to some of the politicians. But if we allow our officers to run this government, we would have bankrupted many years ago. So that is that is the setup that we have in our system. Everybody is corrupt. Everybody is corrupt. So therefore, I think discussion about the corruption and of course the anti-corruption is a very much relevant to the ISL than any other institute, because we are the people who are at the front for the development. So if you want to develop this nation, we must get the leadership, and we must make sure that there is no corruption. Because though we talk about again, I am talking about the politician. For me, I understand the politician even doesn't need to carry the pen, because he doesn't sign for any document. As far as I know, very few document he has to sign. He never signed the check. He never signed the agreement. He never do. He is bringing the people's interest to the ministry. I mean, the officers have to carry out. Therefore, we try to blame somebody who has no authority to take any decision. But of course, there are ways and means they try to fix us and try to get the thing done. You remember, like similar situation happened to me while I was in the ministry. Minister was trying to ask me to do something which is illegal. I have kept keep it that I won't be able to do it. But finally, he left the ministry. right? So it is why he left the ministry. He know that only as a secretary I can sign that document and forward the document. If he could do it, he would have done it, but he can't do it. That is the reality. Therefore, I believe talking and practicing the anti-corruption is must be start at the ISL level. Engineers has a bigger role to combat the corruption. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ranjit Dissanayake. Yeah. So now we are going to start our session. So the first one, the session one, will be on mobilizing engineering ethics against corruption. So I would like to invite a senior person in the civil engineering academy, right? So he is Professor Priyan Dias. He's graduated from University of Sri Lanka, Moratuwa, with the BSc Engineering Honours and got his PhD from University of London in 1986. He is an honorary life fellow of the Institution of Engineers, Sri Lanka. He is also a corporate member of the Institution of Structural Engineers, UK. He is an exceptional scholar in civil engineering and structural engineering. He is Professor Emeritus at the University of Moratuwa. He received the Excellence in Engineering Award from the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka in 2011. And he is the 10 times winner of the President's Research Award in Sri Lanka. With this small note, I would like to invite Sir Professor Priyan Dias to talk about mobilizing engineering ethics against corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Udeni, for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time I have talked about corruption. And not many times have I talked about ethics. But anyway, as somebody mentioned, corruption is all pervasive. So we need to look into ourselves also when we talk about this subject. And I will try to tell some stories as we go along. Part of the reason I accepted this invitation is because I have about now almost 4 years ago, I wrote this book, putting together some ideas I had about engineering, about the philosophy of engineering. And one of the aspects of that, of course, is about ethics. So I have done some reading on the subject, even though I have not spoken very much. You can see also the affiliations that I like to sort of go by, and they are listed at the bottom of this slide. Right. Okay, I'm not going to talk very much about the definitions of corruption and things like that, but as you can see, it is the misuse of power for private gain, either at one's own instigation or in response to inducements. And there are various types of corruptions and classifications and things like that, and some authors here are mentioned. But one of the important things in this slide, and maybe Ranjit touched on it briefly, and maybe not quite, is that there are two entities agreeing to act together in a corrupt manner. And like he correctly said, most of the time we blame politicians for corruption. And I think it's not a very good practice, you know, because politicians are necessary for the country. And everybody talks about, 225 people in parliament being corrupt. That is not a good thing to say, because we need our next generation also going to parliament. So when you talk about things like that, you try to see in parliament, are there 1 or 2 or 3 or 20? You may have your own number. So when you talk about it, you say that 220 people are corrupt or 215 people are corrupt. And that can lead to a conversation. Because it's very serious to say all 225 are corrupt, because no one is going to politics. I will talk about that later also. And also, increasingly, I think there is the understanding that it is not only the public sector, but the private sector as well. As they say, it takes two hands to clap. So if all these inducements are being obtained by the politicians, who is giving it to them? Probably the private sector. So private sector is often talked about as the engine of growth. Maybe we need to start talking about it as the engine of corruption as well. Anyway, let's go on. So this paper talks about some of these tensions, this paper that is referred to here. Now, we have the idea of ethics, but coupled with ethics, we have, so all of us have a sense of ethics, but we also have certain cultural norms. Some of those cultural norms dictate the way we understand ethics and the kind of ethics we are comfortable with. So that's one tension that you can see. The other tension, of course, is between corruption and accountability. And certainly, it's very good to say, and the president himself said it, and we need to have some kind of, moral sort of, almost crusade to say we should not be corrupt. But people by nature are corrupt. I mean, different religions, for example, talk about it in different ways. I mean, Buddhism talks about tanha. I mean, Christianity talks about original sin and things like that. So there's a tendency to corruption, right? The way that we tackle it is not to say, we can have sermons and things like that, which are also good things, but we must have accountability structures. So these tensions must be there, right? Now, this slide is a bit crowded, but it talks about two of these tensions, about ethical theories and cultural norms. So you can read the slide while I tell a story, two stories. When I was teaching at Moratuwa, there was a student who was about to graduate, but had not got through his second year structural mechanics subject. He had about 25 marks. Now, he wanted me to alter the mark so that he could get a pass mark of 40. He also told me that he would get a letter. I told him, I can't do this. I mean, I have to maintain standards. He said, I can get a letter signed by all my batchmates that they do not mind, because I said, this is unfair by the people who have passed. He said, I can get a letter. And what is worse, there's a colleague of mine who I respect, who said that may not be so bad also. So, right. So that is one story. The other story, a friend of mine was wanting to emigrate to Australia. He went to the Ceylon German Technical Training Institute to get a qualification in baking. So he was very good, and during all his continuous assessment or something like that, he performed very well, and the instructor liked him a lot. But he made a mistake in the final exam, right? So the instructor said, no, you have not done very well, but I can see what I can do for you. So my friend, I will use his real name, but only his first name. So my friend Rohan told the instructor, sir, if you pass me, I will lose all the respect I have for you. So a different kind of story, right? So the second person was using what is called deontological ethics, absolutist ethics. There is a certain sense of right and wrong, okay? Certain things are right, certain things are wrong, full stop. Maybe the first person was also using ethics, utilitarian ethics, right? The greatest good for the greatest number of people, right? So if everybody in the batch is okay with it and he's okay with it, it's okay, right? Now, of course, this paper from Italy, I think, it says, a study done through a survey and things like that, says only engineers with a strong deontological orientation. Deontological means, ontos means being. So coming from our being, right? And often, I think, endorsed by sort of religious values and things like that. Clear understanding of right and wrong, right? Only engineers with strong deontological orientation, low ethical subjectivity, and a strong readiness to fight corruption, low corruption acceptance, and high awareness of corruption can successfully fight corruption, right? So apparently this deontological ethics is very important. However, it's not easy. I mean, if everybody sort of has these deontological ethics and keeps avoiding places that are likely to get you into trouble with respect to corruption, then like I said earlier, we will not have anybody going into politics. Anyone with a strong sense of deontological ethics may not go into politics, saying that if I go there, it's dirty and I will get my, I will not be able to keep my moral values. So there is another branch of ethics called virtue ethics. Virtue ethics means, well, you are recognize that the world cannot be seen in black and white, but you even go to dark places thinking that the whole process of trying to fight things that are wrong might, help the society at large, and it might make you also a better person. So virtue ethics is not as clear cut as deontological and absolutist ethics. Now, very often these cultural norms, now there are various things we can talk about cultural norms, but two main divisions are this idea of a guilt culture and shame culture. Right? Now, guilt culture arises, I mean, it's very closely associated with this deontological ethics. For example, now I remember when I was a student in London also, Oxford Street is a very busy street, but some days there are no vehicles, right? So the traffic lights still blink. And like in Sri Lanka, in London also, if the traffic light is red for the pedestrians, people walk if there is no traffic. There are some pedestrians who don't walk. I like that. Those are all Germans, right? Germans have a strong sort of guilt culture, right? They see everything in black and white. And people say, and a lot of Western ethics is based on it, right? That's what people say. I'm not really an expert, but I know a little bit about it, right? And people say this happens because in Western cultures, children are brought up only by two parents, right? They don't live very close to their parents or relations or grandmothers or grandfathers or things like that. So a child learns that there are only two opinions, father and mother, about what is right and what is wrong, right? In Eastern cultures, of course, we have this, everybody bringing up the child, right? Grandfather, grandmother. So the child recognizes that, right and wrong is a socially negotiated thing, right? Because one person says something is right, other person says it's okay. And so it's a socially negotiated thing, right? So for such people, these black and white things don't really occur, right? So maybe my student was maybe brought up in a shame culture and maybe Rohan was brought up in a guilt culture. I don't know. Or maybe he operated on those cultures. But these are things to think about when we think about corruption, right? So the other thing is about traffic, operating in traffic also, right? So, the best example of, this social negotiation is, right? Now, those days when, we didn't have air-conditioned cars, you had to give hand signal, right? This is the right. Then I think we had to do something like this to turn left. Now, in Sri Lanka, there used to be, this kind of signal. So that means you're turning right. You are going into the stream of traffic that is going in this direction, and you're telling them to sort of come this way. So that's pure social negotiation. Social negotiation. No traffic laws, only social negotiation, right? So I'm suggesting that these kinds of attitudes do not help very much when it comes to, like this author says, a strong deontological orientation. So I am not saying that Sri Lankans or Indians or Pakistanis are more corrupt than Germans or the British or Americans, right? But there is a difference in cultures and we need to recognize them. Okay, we need to recognize. Right. Then we talk about our culture. Now we talk about our profession. Right. Now, engineering is a very noble profession because in most codes of conduct, it says that engineers must hold paramount public safety, health, and welfare. So we have a lawyer in our midst. So presumably lawyers and doctors and architects and everyone. To them, the client is the most important thing. For engineers, our client is not the most important thing. Our client is not the most important thing. According to our code of conduct, we need to look after public interests. Right? I will talk about clients later on. Now, this is very noble, but engineers are often accused of, being involved in this corruption. Now, the reason, Carl Mitcham, one of the most sort of foremost philosophers of engineering, he says actually, although most engineering codes say that the roots of engineering sort of militate against that. Engineers were first servants of the military, right? That is why, when civil engineering was formed, when the concept of civil engineering came, it was to make a distinction between military and non-military engineering. The non-military engineering was called civil engineering. Whether you are a mechanical or electrical or electronics or telecommunication or highway engineer, you are a civil engineer. That is a non-military engineer. But originally, the engineers were serving the military. And if you want to serve the military and the state through the military, then you have to have loyalty. Loyalty was a very important concept for engineers, and that may be probably still in our psyche. After that, engineers, went through, when the civil engineering and all the other branches of engineering were established, perhaps in the beginning or middle of the 20th century, the concept of efficiency became very important to engineering, right? Because they were serving large corporations. One author has said that in no other profession do such a large number of people work in a single organization, often towards a single project. Engineers work together in groups in order for there to be efficiency in the large company, right? So, even though our stated priority is the public, our history has been such, and we are still maybe part of that history, is that we have showed an allegiance to the state and to the allegiance of the corporation. So like I said earlier, these are the two entities that in fact are, putting their hands together to generate corruption, right? So I don't know, we need to maybe educate a new generation of engineers for them to understand that corporations and the state are the two worst enemies of the public. Corporations and the state are the two worst enemies of the public. You can ask me questions about it later on if you agree or disagree, right? Now, Mitcham also says that, engineering has a disadvantage in that we do not have very clearly identifiable, what shall I say, aims. Okay, that's the word he uses, aims, right? So let me give an example through, the President Trump, right? We will not talk about President Rajapaksa and President Wickremesinghe because we might get into trouble, right? President Trump. So especially during the COVID crisis, President Trump suddenly says, I don't think it's necessary for us to have lockdowns. I don't think it's necessary for us to get vaccinated. Now he gets pushback from people like Fauci and other health experts because the doctors, they have a goal. Their goal is health. And anything anybody says will need to be contested because of it. So that aim is health. Then also during that time, he said, America should ban people from what he calls shithole countries. I don't know whether you remember that word. Sorry for mentioning it in this August assembly. But then he got pushback from the judges. Judges said, no, there are certain immigration laws. If those people satisfy those laws, because the aim of the discipline of law is justice, very clear aims. But then President Trump also said, let's build a wall so that people from Mexico cannot come into the US, right? And so engineers don't know how to deal with that. Engineers don't know how to deal with that because the aim of engineering, as defined in the ICE original manifesto in 1828, is to direct the great sources of power in nature for the use and convenience of man, right? So, a wall can be for the use and convenience of man, like so many things can be for the use and convenience of man, right? The Lotus Tower, for example, can be for the use and convenience of men. I will talk about that later on because I was involved in it, right? Okay, now in the middle of all this is the professional institutions of which Institution of Engineers is a part, right? So if you can think about these three entities, now for engineers, engineering individuals, most often because they work in large groups, right? An architect, of course, might deal directly with the client. But for engineers, it is their employer who is their client, right? So there is some project, and then you are assigned to do a certain thing that will contribute to the entire project, right? You don't deal directly with the client in most cases for engineers, right? So then, if your employer asks you to do something not so right, or say, please keep quiet about this or something like that, what do you do, right? So you have society at large, then, you don't interact directly with society, then what do you do? So, these authors say, I have quoted these authors, these things are taken directly from my book, but they're all sort of, the ideas are from these authors who are mentioned. Davis, let me read this. The engineers' membership in such institutions, the ethical codes of which their fellow engineers and even employers, if engineers would abide by too, could give them the confidence to defy their employer clients in the public interest if the need arises, right? In practice, however, the evidence indicates that professional institutions are unwilling or unable to support individual engineers in this area. Okay? So hence, such individuals are forced to choose between compromising their standards or fulfilling their ethical obligations by whistleblowing, right? So Now, I'll mention one or two examples, just one example. I think some time ago, there was a lady engineer in State Engineering Corporation who got into some trouble because she refused to do something, right? Every single former general manager of State Engineering Corporation, I think, tried to intervene on her behalf, but nothing happened. Right? Anyway, fortunately, she had, permanent residence in Australia and she went to Australia, right? But clearly, institution does not see that that is part of their role, right? And not only the IESL, engineering institutions all over the world. So maybe that's something that we can think about, right? Right. So now this is the Lotus Tower, right? So Lotus Tower idea was somewhere in the 2011, 2012, that kind of time, right? So there are, off and on you get letters in the newspaper calling this a white elephant and various things contributing to the economic crisis and things like that. Now I ended up as the sort of structural engineering lead on the review team, right? This is reviewed all totally by Morotu, right? So this is a cartoon by Gihan Chikera, one of my favorite cartoonists, about this bungee jumping and sort of, linking it to the decline in the economy and things like that, right? Now, I was really conflicted at this time because, okay, this is an interesting project. I knew I could get all my colleagues involved in this, tall building, a lot of what shall I say? The very, very tall mast, also crosswind oscillation, all of those things were relatively new, right? I mean, meaning, okay, you can study it in textbooks, but a real project, right? But at the same time, university academics were sort of going on strike, to have 6% of GDP for education. One of the things that, and I was sort of peripherally involved in that as well, right? I had a sticker on my car actually saying 6% of GDP for education, right? There was a group called University Teachers for Dialogue and Democracy that I was a part of, and that kind of, right? And this is, Nirmal Ranjit Devasiri, who was president of FUTA at that time. Okay. But anyway, I decided to, continue my involvement with the Lotus Tower, and I did whatever I could. I sort of tried to ensure there was knowledge transfer and all of that kind of thing. Partly because if I didn't do it, somebody else would do it. But can you see? I mean, this, we are all part of this sort of corruption thing, right? This is something about road projects, and a lot of things can be said about road projects. So this is coming from the IMF, written many years ago, Roads to Nowhere, how corruption in public investment hurts growth. Now, what he's saying is, most people think that if you have new investment, that is better for the country than maintaining old roads. He's saying that getting all of these new investments, not in Sri Lanka, in a cross-section of countries, is to make sure that there is money and so that it feeds corruption. And he's saying, actually, both of these authors are saying it's better to maintain roads rather than having new investment. So anyway, that's one particular opinion, right? Now I will tell you about this story also, right? So this happened a little later, I mean 2015, 16, during that time, I think Yahapalani regime, soon as they came in 2015 or 16, right? So there was, I think, an Indian company with some French connection also trying to sort of offload these so-called steel houses, right? Because there was a housing crisis in the north and the east, right? So some people approached me and said, this is a bad idea for people in Jaffna. Can you do something about it? So I wrote this report, and because that civil society movement was quite strong, nothing came of this project. And in a sense, the project was derailed, right? So now still I'm not sure whether I did the right thing. It's not very clear, okay? Now, did I prevent people from getting houses? These engineering aims are not as clear as in medicine and in law. It's fairly clear what justice is, fairly clear what health is, right? Use and convenience of man, not so clear, right? So let's have those thoughts in mind as we go on, but maybe some things we need to know what is right and what is wrong and to do those things, right? So one of the things is to build awareness, right? Especially for engineering students and maybe even graduates and people like us to have these kinds of discussions, to know about, what are the kinds of ethics, but also to know about our inherent weaknesses. There may be some inherent weaknesses in our culture. There may be some inherent weaknesses in the nature of our profession. And so we need to take steps against, right? then professional institutions can think seriously about, their role in this thing, at least if nothing else, to support whistleblowers, right? And then, somebody mentioned also about, Ranjit mentioned about this economic recovery. So on Tuesday, yes, Indrajit Kumaraswamy came and spoke to the Society of Structural Engineers at the annual general meeting about the way forward, right? In fact, he mentioned that, this IMF report, he said that is a positive thing because I think no other country has got this corruption chapter, a review of corruption, and that may be a first for countries who have been, subject to IMF review. So there's potential for us to go somewhere, right? But what he was saying is that, because next year is an election year also, if people are wanting increases in wages, it has to be backed up with productivity. You cannot have just increase in wages without an increase in productivity. I was, of course, telling him later because I had to escort him to his car. I was telling him maybe we have to think also about our aspirations. I think Sri Lankans by and large have large aspirations. I think many academics, for example, in India, go around and professionals go around in scooters. Sometimes you can see it in these films and things like that. They go around in scooters, not in air-conditioned cars, right? I'm not sure how many Indians send their children overseas for education, but these are sort of common Sri Lankan aspirations. So if you have high aspirations, then you have to be able to finance those aspirations, right? And so that is also an issue, I think. We need to see whether we have too many aspirations, right? I will end with a humorous story because it involves the ISL and it involves, I think, a past president in a very favorable light, of course. So once I had to go and review an institution for training, these institutions, are reviewed by the ISL, whether they are fit to be places where engineers can train to be given their charters. So this is Mr. GJP Gunawardena. He was former president, right? Former president, and of course, irrigation department. My father also knew him because my father was in the agriculture. So now, in these kinds of things, the institution that is reviewed has to provide transport for the ISL nominees. So from somewhere in Colombo, and they had a van, and on the way back, now I noticed that the person who was accompanying us, he was looking back. I mean, there was another vehicle also coming behind. So now GJP got down first because he lived in Visakha Road, right? But somewhere in Bambalapitiya. So when he got down, this gentleman from the company went to the other vehicle and took a small box and tried to give it to GJP Gunawardena. So I knew what GJP will do. He was sort of horrified and he sort of said, no way to do this. He's not accepting anything from this company, right? So anyway, now we continued on the journey towards Dehiwala, and then somewhere near the Dehiwala bridge, this gentleman, he was anyway trying to explain, and so I said, no, we cannot do things like this. So then he asked me, now, will you also not accept the box? I said, no way, I'm going to accept this box. So he said, if you don't mind, wait a minute. And then he stopped the vehicle. Then he went to the other vehicle and said, now you can go back because otherwise all the petrol would be wasted in going to Dehiwala as well. So that's a humorous story to end this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that interesting speech. Yeah, you basically talk about ethical norms and cultural norms, social negotiation, and also corporation and state are the worst enemies of public, and also the role of the institution. We'll discuss those things later. And then we are moving to the session 2. That is, that will be another important talk that will be on minimizing bribery and corruption that is vital for rapid development. That will be presented by Engineer Nissanka Wijeyaratne. He is the Secretary General of the and also the CEO of the Chamber of Construction Industry of Sri Lanka, that is CCI. He has done tremendous work on preventing corruption in Sri Lanka. Since the construction industry has been heavily criticized about corruption, his work will be very important that we need to know. So with this very small note, I would like to invite Engineer Nishanka Wijeyaratne to present his case. Over to you, sir.
Professor Ranjit Disanayake, President IESL, past presidents, Professor Priyan Dias, President Council Suraj Jaman, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to everyone. I am very pleased and surprised that I was invited to speak at this session, at this occasion. I'm pleased because IESL is conducting this the first time. 9th December 2023 is the 20th anniversary of the UN Convention Against Corruption, which is commemorated as the International Anti-Corruption Day in each year. As per the UN, I think this is very important, preventing corruption, promoting transparency, and strengthening institutions is crucial to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. As per the World Bank, the simple definition of corruption is the abuse of public office for private gain, which covers a wide range of behavior from bribery to theft or misuse of public funds. I think Professor Dias also mentioned about the definition. This is what the World Bank says. Then, according to Transparency International, corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain, which erodes trust, weakens democracy, hampers economic development, and exacerbates inequality, poverty, social division, and the environmental crisis. As per the Anti-Corruption Act, number 9 of 2023, I'm sure President Council Suraj Jaman will elaborate on these. Bribery means the offer, solicitation, or acceptance of any gratification in contravention of any provision of the Act for performing any official duty. And gratification includes money or any gift, loan, fee, reward, commission, valuable security, or other property or interest in property of any description, whether movable, intangible, and unreal or immovable. For the purposes of this paragraph, money includes currency, which is in digital or virtual form, recognized as legal tender, whether or not such currency is recognized in Sri Lanka. Any office, employment, or contract. Any payment, release, discharge, or liquidation of any loan, obligation, or other liability whatsoever, whether in whole or in part. Sexual favor. Any other service, favor, or advantage of any description whatsoever, including protection from any penalty or disability incurred or apprehended from any action or proceedings of a disciplinary or penal nature, whether or not already instituted, including the exercise or the forbearance from the exercise of any right or any official power or duty. and any offer, undertaking, or promise of any ratification within the meaning of the preceding paragraphs. That is A to E. IMF Governance Diagnostic Assessment conducted in September 2023, which is in fact the first of that kind in Asia, has revealed systematic and severe governance weaknesses and corruption vulnerabilities across state functions, with particular macroeconomic impact in budget, credibility, expenditure control, public investment management and control of spending, public procurement, management and oversight of SOEs, transparency of revenue policy, and the integrity of revenue administration, the governance and legal frameworks of the central bank, the application of financial sector regulations, and clarity and security of land ownership and the integrity of the judicial sector. Corruption vulnerabilities are exacerbated by weak accountability institutions, including the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery and corruption, that have neither the authority nor competency to successfully fulfill their functions. Current governance and arrangements have not established clear standards for permissible official behavior acted to deter and sanction transgressions, nor pursued individuals and stolen public funds that have exited the country. Regular civil society participation in monitoring of government actions is restricted by limited transparency, the lack of platforms for inclusive and participatory governance, and by broad application of counter-terrorism rules. These weaknesses and vulnerabilities highlight several broader governance themes that need to be addressed for planned reforms to be sustained. Problematic structural issues that shape governance dynamics include the compromised independence of key governance institutions, critical gaps in the legal and regulatory infrastructure for managing and overseeing public resources, limited fiscal discipline and transparency, and a disorganized regulatory and legislative process that provides for insufficient review and engagement. Minimal progress has been made in integrating modern information technology into public sector operations and public-private interfaces, or in linking information to detect and correct inefficiencies and improprieties. And this is very important. They say we have very little digital framework in governance. These governance features form the basis for the substitution of informal mechanisms of control for rule-based system of accountability, for performance and integrity over an expansive state, the impunity for misbehavior enjoyed. So these are the issues that we have to encounter or rather sort out if we are to effectively come out from the economic bankruptcy and lead into a development path. Specific weaknesses identified by the governance diagnostic assessment. Anti-corruption legal frameworks and institutional arrangements are in flux due to very recent passage of Anti-Corruption Act, needs transparent and merit-based process for selection of CIABOC commissioners. Current approaches to anti-money laundering are not effective. Lack of a robust legal framework in public finance management. Corruption vulnerabilities high due to absence of a public procurement law. I think this is quite interesting because even now, the National Procurement Commission is thinking of adopting a new procurement guideline. But when IMF is talking about the need for a public procurement law, weaknesses in tax policy practices, lack of coordination in revenue administration, weakness relating to central bank governance, corruption around contract administration, and property rights. Now, those are the main points they have highlighted in governance issues. Now let us look at where we stand on Corruption Perception Index published by Transparency International and Ease of Doing Business Index published by World Bank. You can see on Corruption Perception Index, Denmark is the #1 best country. Then you get New Zealand, Singapore, and all that. Sri Lanka is in the 101th place out of 180. Ease of Doing Business Index, I think first country is New Zealand. Sri Lanka in 99th place. I think India is above us in all these counts, having such a large population and numerous other issues. What is interesting is in countries where the CPI is also good, EDY rank is also good. So less corruption is better to attract investments. We have seen an increased trend of corruption in recent years. One reason often attributed is the executive presidency and proportional representation. We have an executive president with almost absolute power. As Lord Acton stated, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolute. If you remember, one reason attributed by late President Jayawardena in introducing the executive presidency was to achieve rapid development. But 45 years after executive presidency, we have declared bankruptcy. Whereas India, with a Westminster type prime minister and a federal structure, is far developed. Since 1994, every president who was elected promised to abolish executive presidency before the election, including President Gotabaya, who pledged to have an entirely new constitution. As such, we had to fight to get the executive presidency replaced by the earlier system. Other factor contributing to high level of corruption is the PR system. For example, for a person to win in Colombo district, he'll need to spend at least 200 million rupees. But sometimes they have gone up to as high as 500 million in campaigning. Raising this kind of money will naturally lead to corruption. We have to change this to earlier first past the post system, like in India. The suggestion is 160 to be elected from the earlier electorates and 56 on district PR based on best runners-up and not on monopoly system, and 15 on national PR. This will avoid the need to campaign in the entire districts and will require less funds for electioneering. Cabinet will be limited to 25 cabinet ministers and 25 state ministers. The ministry function should be fixed as in USA by the Constitution. This in government service, I used to work as a secretary for about 8 years. We have seen when the cabinets change, the ministries are changed, and you have to change the letterheads. Sometimes people don't know certain function, which minister is handling. We have a very poor record of prosecuting politicians as after 1957. No parliamentarian was removed on charges of corruption. In 1957, it was after the Talgadupitiya Commission. In the present parliament, we have a minister who was convicted with 2 years RI, suspended for 5 years, imposed a fine of 25 million, and ordered to pay compensation of 1 million by the High Court. He continues as minister on the excuse that he has appealed. In public service, is this possible? When there is a prima facie case, you are immediately detected. You can't serve in office. In India, we saw a minister resigning after a major train accident. That is the level of accountability expected in a mature democracy. To curb bribery and corruption, as stated in IMF GDA, is essential to ensure the independence of CMO and also strengthen its operational capacity by providing capable investigators. The commissioner should be selected by a more transparent procedure. Another cause for our economic collapse is the undertaking of large infrastructure projects without satisfactory economic internal rate of return on borrowed foreign capital. As these projects do not yield any export revenue, naturally we are stuck on loan repayments. Loan repayments in foreign funds. Southern Expressway will not have a positive EIR beyond Matharan. I can vouch for this because I was project director of Southern Expressway at some stage. Mattala Airport, international conference hall, no international conference was held up to now. Undertaking all 3 stages of Mattala Port. Actually, earlier plan was to only build the stage 1. And Central Expressway beyond Kurunegala will also be in same category. On the other hand, we abandoned the LRT and upgrading KV line projects which were on concessionary loans and had EIR close to 12%, which is a very good rate. LRT in particular was on a very concessionary loan at 0.1% interest with 40 years payback and a grace period of 10 years on interest and capital payment. Very important, interest payment was waived during the first 10 years. After we cancelled LRT, the Japanese constructed in Bangladesh, and now it is up and running. Above actions can be classified as corruptions in the system. To avoid similar actions in future, the Chamber of Construction Industry has strongly advocated the establishment of an independent National Planning Commission, the clearance of which shall be mandatory for all projects above, say, 500 billion rupees. In India, the NPC is functioning very well for the last 30 years. And it is credited to have led India out of a similar economic situation in 1991 under the stewardship of Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was the vice chairman of the NPC for a long time before entering politics. Recently, a felicitation of German brands was held with the German ambassador as chief guest. There are about 300 German brands in Sri Lanka. At this function, the ambassador in his speech mentioned following 3 steps Sri Lanka has to take to attract more and more investments. Cut down red tape and corruption to grant project and construction approvals fast. Improve on corruption perception index and uh, mm, and I can't see this and ease of doing business index. Establish uniform application and supremacy of rule of law with speedier judicial processes. These are the three basic points he mentioned during his speech that will facilitate faster, more and more investments. One method to cut down corruption and delays is to digitize the approval process. In fact, digitize the whole governance process. In Singapore, all building applications are needed to be applied online, and the approval process will not take more than 10 days. There is no human contact in the approval process. It's all online. Even payments will be made online. Here, though, there is supposed to have a one-stop process in the UTA, still you need to get clearances from several statutory authorities, and you'll be lucky to get these at least within 3 months. There have been instances that took 3 years to get development permit due to no fault of the developer's plans. Simply red tape in the system. Of course, the developer was not prepared to pay any undue amounts. To ensure issue of development permits within 28 days, on an initiative by the chamber, the Presidential Commission on Simplification of Laws and Regulations in June 2021 proposed a statutory mechanism by establishing a committee comprising all relevant statutory authorities amending the UDA Act. And this committee was given by law definite time targets to process an application. The commission even submitted the detailed amendments for this. But sadly, to this date, no action is taken. Actually, this was proposed as an interim measure. The final solution proposed was to have an online process for the building application like in Singapore. I will cite 3 examples of investment proposals that did not materialize due to red tape and possibly corruption in the system. Now, these 3 I personally am aware of. 1,200 megawatt LNG power plant with LNG offloading platform, an investment of $1.3 billion submitted in response to RFP call for industrial developers at the Hambantota port. In spite of a cabinet approval given in 2013, this project did not take off due to red tape, even though the developers, a British company based in Hong Kong, offered to sell electricity at 7 US cents per kilowatt hour and with no capacity charge. Had that been on stream, we wouldn't have had the power cuts, and also electricity charges should have been much less. Because now they say the average cost of production is 65 rupees per kilowatt hour. Then a Swedish investor's proposal to produce 7 megawatts from the garbage dump at Vitoramunda by scientifically managing the dump. In fact, he conducted practical tests also at the dump. Electricity was to be sold at the same rate as mini hydros. If this was agreed, the disaster that happened with the collapse of the dump could have been avoided. And I think in this disaster, about 40 people lost their lives. Then, Sitavaka hydropower project proposed by the chamber. In fact, the chamber was not even called for project discussion because we clearly said we won't pay any commissions to them. The recent landmark judgment by a 5-judge bench of Supreme Court has definitely boosted our rule of law regime. It will give a glimmer of hope to the possible investors that on the effectiveness of rule of law in Sri Lanka. In my view, one factor that was instrumental in corruption and much economic loss is the projects approved on unsolicited proposals. If you compare the cost of expressway contracts, it will be very clear that the contracts awarded on competitive bids were much less costly than the unsolicited ones. I think even to date, the cheapest expressway was the ADB funded Southern Expressway from Sulanggoda to Andhra. We should insist on always inviting competitive bids, if necessary, limiting tenders from the particular country when you receive an unsolicited bid. In fact, this is being practiced in some countries. For sure, I know in Ghana it's the case. You need at least 3 bids, even if it's unsolicited proposal. Now there is a lot of debate on whether the corrupt money invested abroad by various people can be traced and recovered. On this, I should draw attention to the Stolen Assets Recovery Initiative implemented by the World Bank in collaboration with UN Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC. Already, more than 100 cases from several countries have been successfully concluded. Sri Lanka is also eligible to apply to this, but we need the will of the government to go through the process. Many international investors and businessmen consider Sri Lanka as a wonderful place to invest. Only if we can get our house in order. So many, during my travels to so many countries, I have come across many people say this, that Sri Lanka is, actually they say, it's a paradise. And they would like to invest. But problem is, we are not ready. On this day of anti-corruption, it has resolved to achieve what the German ambassador practically summarized for an investment-friendly environment. Thank you.
Done. Thank you, Engineer Nishanka Vijayaratna, that you talk about Anti-Corruption Act 2023, and also we may discuss the engineer's responsibility and roles in this work, and also you mentioned about the absence of a public procurement law in this country, and also one good point that you say less corruption attracts investments according to Corruption Perception Index and also the Ease of Doing Business Index. Those are very important indexes. I think that's very important topics that we can discuss. And then we are moving to the session 3. The session 3 will be on understanding the value of engineers in Sri Lanka's fight against corruption, and also that is done by a non-engineer. So that's very interesting. So I would say it is President's Counsel, Mr. Sarath Jayawardena, is a former senior additional solicitor general of the Attorney General's Department. He has earned a reputation as a versatile and well-respected senior prosecutor and was instrumental in introducing DNA and telephone evidence to the Sri Lankan Criminal Court. He is now an active member of the private bar. A holder of a master degree in criminology and criminal justice from the University of Oxford, he obtained a Bachelor of Applied Science degree from the University of Sri Jayawardena. He was the recipient of the prestigious Chevening and Fulbright scholarships. He was the chairperson of the committee appointed by the Minister of Justice to draft the new Anti-Corruption Act, which came into operation a few months back. He is also a member of the committee that has been appointed by the Minister of Justice to draft a law pertaining to proceeds of crime, also known as asset recovery. So with this note, I would like to invite President's Counsel, Mr. Sarath Jayamanne, to start your talk.
Good morning to you, Professor Dissanayake, other distinguished academics, and the members of the association. And today is a very important day for inviting me for this conference. It is a great pleasure to have been invited me, and I take pleasure in coming here and making a presentation on this Anti-Corruption Day. Today we mark the World Anti-Corruption Day. And by now, you know exactly how the world and international commitment towards the anti-corruption. Now, I'm reminded of a instance where a leader of a foreign country visited Sri Lanka. He came here in Sri Lanka in 1950s. He was a budding leader, and he saw this paradise. He went back to his country. He got round some of his friends and compared Sri Lanka with his country. What is the comparison? Sri Lanka is blessed with so much resources, but his country was never blessed with any resources. It was in the poverty line, and the corruption was so high. The drug menace was there. But he got hold of one of his friends who studied at Oxford and another friend from Cambridge. He became the Minister of Law thereafter. They contested the election and won the election. Then he wanted to make his country like Colombo. He made a determination saying, my country does not have any resources, but I'll see that my country will one day become Colombo. His only motto is meritocracy and integrity. He will recruit to the public service the best and the talented, who must have the integrity. And they even brought water from Malaysia. He had a lot of confrontation with Japanese. After the Second World War, he asked the British to remain in his country. Why? To get his country settled. So primary objective of his entire mission is to have a clean Singapore. As you now show, in the world ranking, anti-corruption ranking, they are number 5. World Ease of West ranking, it is the same. Now you see the correlation between the anti-corruption and the economy and the business investment. How did he do that? This is the best example. He applied the law equally. There was a special bureau charged with the anti-corruption investigation. He was in charge. He was nominally in charge of that particular institute, but he was never supervising the investigation. Then he got the information, one of his ministers, a national development minister, he was under investigation. For what? He is alleged to have taken a bribe from a property developer. This property developer wanted to have government lands, government property to put up several buildings. Apparently, he has accepted a bribe. This anti-corruption bureau, they were conducting investigations. Then what happened? This minister, Tee Chan Wan, he wanted to meet the Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. He has sent this message to the Cabinet Secretary. Then Lee Kuan Yew has said, if I were to meet you, what would be the general public perception about me? They might think, I'm encouraging, I'm supporting, you have my blessings. Number 1. Number 2, if you come and discuss with me the case, certainly I'll be a witness in a potential case. So that is how he prevented this particular minister meeting the Prime Minister. Few days later, when he was at his residence, the Prime Minister, one of the staff members came and knocked on the door. Then the Prime Minister was told that this particular minister's wife has informed that this particular minister is now in the bedroom and there is no any response from him. It appears he is dead. In the meantime, a letter written by this Minister Wan, handwritten letter, prior to his death, he has sent it to the Prime Minister. This officially brought that letter also. Few days later, this letter was read in Parliament. Prime Minister in Parliament read out that letter. Now, there was a request after the death from the wife and the daughter of this particular minister that conducting an autopsy, postmortem is an insult to us. So therefore, please prevent any autopsy being held. Prime Minister responded saying, look here, There's a law in this country. If it is not a natural death, you have to conduct a post-mortem report. So he refused the request of the wife and the daughter. He ordered a post-mortem examination be held, and the pathologist came to the conclusion that he has committed, this particular minister has committed suicide. In Parliament, the Prime Minister, he read out the letter where he says, I am extremely sorry. I am apologetic to you. A man of my caliber should not have accepted that bribe. So then he committed suicide, and after committing the suicide, his wife and daughter could not remain any longer in Singapore. Why? Overall, right throughout the country, there was some kind of anti-minister feelings. They were not welcome in Singapore. They had to leave that country. This is the way in other countries they have started their journey. If they have started that journey, why can't we, as Mr. Dissanayake said, we need not rely on the politicians, but as citizens of this country, a major role that we can play. What is the major role that we can play? For example, we became a member of the UNCAC in the year 2004. And since then, UNODC, they have been supervising, they have been finding the gaps in our anti-corruption law. Then they have found our law, the bribery law was introduced in the year 1954. Then the commission law was introduced in the year 1994. For the last 30 years, we have not brought a single amendment, except one or two minor amendments. We have not even amended our laws. So that is the reason even the UNODC, then the European Union, IMF, you name any, they have found fault with us. That is the why we have started this journey in preparing a new anti-corruption law in the year 2019. By that time, we prepared the law. Thereafter, there was a change of government. It was put into the dustbin. After this government came in, last year, the Minister of Justice appointed a committee in which I was made the chairperson. Now, we have drafted the new law after examining the loopholes in the existing system, the practical difficulties, and after comparing other jurisdictions as well. We have been in touch with 3 countries at least. We want to get more closer to Singapore in our anti-corruption drive. At the very beginning, there was no great response. But then we reached the other country in the Asia region, whose name appeared as the second least anti-corruption country in the Asia. That is Hong Kong. They are number 15 in the anti-corruption ranking. Your list did not contain the name of Hong Kong. Then number 25, Bhutan. They became very close friend of us. So then from their learning, we have made use of that. We have visited those countries. We have visited several other countries and international organizations. So therefore, couple of things are there that we have noticed what is lacking in our system. The independence of the Anti-Corruption Commission. What is the independence? When you are an anti-corruption body, you can't be working under the government rule. So therefore, first of all, the appointments must be made, as you know, by the Constitutional Council. This time we have made certain qualifications and disqualifications as well to become a commissioner. Earlier, only the judges could become. Not only now, this time, the engineer like you can become one of the commissioners. Because I know the value of an engineer, a forensic accountant and auditor. Their uptake is very quick. Their thinking pattern is different to traditional public servants or traditional judges. Judges are confined to their chambers or courts. They may not have the leadership skills. They may not have the investigation skills. But when an engineer is there as one of the commissioners, they totally bring a different complexion to the picture. That is why I want to see out of 3 commissioners, one has to be a person excelled in law. 2 others can be from the varied fields like forensic accounting, auditing, engineering, management, etc. Then they have to be selected by the Constitution Council, not by the President. I understand now the Constitution Council, they are in the process of selecting the commissioners, because according to the new act that came on the 8th of August, they have to appoint new commissioners. Then the Director General, I was appointed to as Director General when I was an additional Solicitor General in the Attorney General's Department. Of course, I was appointed by the President, Maithripala Sirisena, but whatever his political background or political thing, I must openly say that he has never interfered with our work. One best example is his secretary or anyone did not know till we arrested his chief of staff at Colombo 5-star hotel while accepting the bribe. He did not know. Even after the arrest, he asked only one sentence. Mr. Jayamanna me katawa ඇත්ත. මං කිව්වා ඇත්ත ජනාධිපති. That's all. That's all. Thereafter, he directly or indirectly never pressed. What happened thereafter? Chief of Staff was prosecuted. He was given 12 years rigorous imprisonment. Against that judgment, they appealed to the Supreme Court. And this year in January, Supreme Court 5-judge bench affirmed the conviction. This is the case of bribery. Now, why we have been successful in that case? As you would ask the question, why we are not arresting other senior ministers? Now, in order to arrest senior ministers or senior public servants, we need evidence. You ask from any person in the private sector, any CEO of the private sector in this country, they would ever complain to Siabok about asking a bribe from a member of a parliament or cabinet? They will never complain. Then how we were successful in this particular raid? The complainant was an Indian national, not a Sri Lankan businessman. He had the courage and the backbone to complain. Now we have just become members of the audience, and we want others to eradicate bribery and corruption. We have just become spectators. When we say we, all of us, members from all these professions, members from the private sector, you just wait and see as a spectator watching a drama, but you never put up your sleeve and come and join in the anti-corruption campaign. So therefore, in order to reduce the bribery and corruption in this country, everyone has to be joined. So the second role the engineers can play is, now we have removed all the taboos with regard to the recruitment. Earlier, we were guided by the Ministry of Public Administration, Management Service Department, Salaries and Cadre Commission. When they prepare the cadre for the Siabok, these high officials see to it that these cadres and the salary of the bribery commissions are much lower. Why? They think only the civil servants must be up in the ladder. But in other countries, the investigators especially the prosecutors. There are very few quality prosecutors you can find in a country. They have to be recruited on a competitive basis. When I wrote to chairman of the Anti-Corruption Commission in Hong Kong, asking his assistants to train my officers, he immediately wrote back and asked, Mr. Chairman, we have a problem with you. These are the exact words he has written to me. But the problem, how can you say your commission is independent? You rely on the investigation borrowed from the police department. At any moment, IGP can remove them, IGP can take the disciplinary action, IGP can transfer them. They are under the command of the IGP, though they are seconded to the bribery commission. We had no answer. We never had except 1 or 2 graduates, maybe few police officers who have passed advanced level. We never had any professional accountant, engineer in our capacity. When I visited Hong Kong to meet the Hong Kong Anti-Corruption Commission, at the entrance to the commission, there is an exhibition area. In an exhibition area, they have prepared certain models of the investigations that they have conducted. While watching those things, before meeting the commissioners, I saw a young girl, a smart girl, looked like a foreign girl, it looks like an Asian country. She was also watching these structures. I asked from her, from where are you? She said, I'm from Bhutan. Okay, good. What is you by profession? I'm an engineer. Okay, that's good. Where are you working? I'm working at the Anti-Corruption Commission. Then I asked, are you involved in constructing a building for the Anti-Corruption Commission? No. No. I am an investigator. I saw stars. I also have a science background, be that as it may. My goodness, then only I happened to open my eyes. So, country like Bhutan recruit engineers for investigators. You have to admit, no, conducting a bribery raid can be done by a police officer. There is no question about that. But conducting an investigation into corruption is a much complicated thing. Yes, you have saw various international interpretations given to the word corruption. But from our law perspective, in simple form, what do you mean by corruption? Corruption means a public servant, it takes a decision. He takes a decision with a criminal mind. What is the criminal mind? He takes this decision with the intention of causing undue advantage to a third party, or undue advantage to himself, or undue loss to another party, or loss to the government. With that intention, if you take a decision or if you take any action, the offense of corruption is constructed. Now, in order to do that, you have to conduct investigation. Present day, what happens is, police officers go in here and there, they are preparing files, recording statement after statement after statement. But an engineer is there as an investigator, they can quickly see through the pathway that you have to go. For example, if an engineer from the construction section is there in the bribery commission as an investigator, when any investigation into corruption related to construction comes, he would exactly know within 10 minutes, these are the elements that you have to look for. Otherwise, the traditional police officers, for them, it's a learning curve. Take months, years, and sometimes decades. So that is why we need your support. Why? We have now removed all the recruitment processes of the government. The new commission has been vested with the power to prepare their own recruitment schemes. And select whoever the experts from any field as an investigator. So you should join there as a permanent? No. There can be permanent staff. Similarly, there can be, if there are good persons from various government bodies, what can you do? They can be on second month, they can join. Then the third category. I think you belong to the third category. What's the third category? Third category is that on contract basis, on short-term basis, on long-term basis, you can join the Anti-Corruption Commission. Maybe 6 months, 1 year. I think that is the national call. That is the national duty. You can join. So then one day you can tell your children and the grandchildren, I have done my part. Whatever the little way, I have gone out of the realm of a spectator, and now I have become an active actor in the anti-corruption. Otherwise, you all your experience, all your academic and professional qualifications would be in vain. That's the reason. This is the second element that you can join. What about the salary? We are not being guided by the treasury. How many times I have gone before the treasury? Not for my personal things. I was well-to-do. I got the salary as additional solicitor general. There was no issue with regard to my salary. How much I tried my level best to increase the salary of the legal officer. And salary of a legal officer in the Anti-Corruption Commission is below 1/3 of a salary of a state council in the Attorney General's department. Attorney General department is an attractive place. These young budding lawyers, they have a dream one day to become High Court judge, Court of Appeal judge, Supreme Court judge, Attorney General, Chief Justice. They have a dream, a prospect of becoming such person one day. With that dream, they can join that in this department. But such attraction is not there. When in 1994, so-called Independent Anti-Corruption Commission was established, there was a circular in the treasury. The salary of a legal officer of the Anti-Corruption Commission should be equal to the salary of a state council. When I showed this, Salaries and Card Commission's treasury, they don't want you. Why? They know their salary sometimes may be higher than the officers in the treasury. So they don't want that to happen. So that is why we have removed all those obstacles. Hereinafter, the Anti-Corruption Commission is a unique commission. They have the power of investigation. They have the power of prosecution. And this time we have given them the power of prevention as well for the first time in our history. So their work is unique, multifaceted, and now we are at a stage of transition. When we are at a stage of transition, my goodness, amount of work we have to do. We have to prepare rules, regulations, recruitment scheme, whatnot. This is the most difficult time. I have been able, with the support of others, prepare the law. But just because the law is prepared, nothing would happen unless the commission is properly armed with the necessary experts and commissions. So then what happened? Now they have to prepare in advance annual budget and submit to the parliament. It is the parliament who gives the approval, then the treasury has to release that funds. When such powers are given to the Anti-Corruption Commission, what do you expect? In return, they also have to be very transparent, the Anti-Corruption Commission. They also have to be very efficacious, efficient. So law requires them to submit quarterly their progressive reports to the Parliament. Every 3 months, they have to submit their progressive reports to Parliament. So that is the way that you can do. And annually also, they have to submit their financial reports. So Parliament can look into not individual investigations, but the progress they have made, if there are any challenges. Basic example, today when I was coming down Baudala Mawata, I showed my 2 juniors. Next to the Bribery Commission, there is a bare land. It has more than, I think, 60 perches. That belongs to the Bribery Commission. That belongs to the Bribery Commission. Then what happened? Suddenly, one of the buildings within the Bribery Commission collapsed. Almost collapsed. The engineers asked not to occupy the place. Then the Department of Archaeology professor said, don't demolish this building. This has an archaeological value also. My goodness. Then I rushed to the President's Secretariat. Mr. Abekwan was there. He was the secretary. Thereafter, Mr. Austin Fernando was there. They were nice. They immediately saw to it, okay, don't worry. We will find you some building. Fortunately, Department of Identification, Register of Identification building, they have put up a new building in Battaramulla. Their old building in Jawata remains. That building was given to me. That is how temporarily we moved into that place. But from the day we went there, various ministers, various other government departments, my goodness, but not they are asking this building for their benefit. Even the STF, they get priority over us. Then I suggested, okay, now we have a bare land. We will put up a building. There is no problem from the executive. Whatever the cabinet papers, they have put. From where the obstacle come from? From where? From where? UDA. How many times I went before the UDA? How many times I went and met the minister in charge of the UDA? When you have this precious land, maybe 60 perches, you will understand you have to maximize the productivity. I have seen in Hong Kong, Nigeria, their Anti-Corruption Commission building. We have to have this for the next at least 25, 30 years. So we have to put up a building at least around 15 stories. Funds-wise, there's no problem at that time. Whatever I request, they were ready to go. Now, UDA says, no, we can't put up a building like that there. The scenery of the BMICH would be disturbed. This is on the side there's not in front of BMICH. That fight went for nearly 2-3 years. Ultimately, they agreed to do a building for 10 stories. By the time 3 years gone, I also left the place. Now it is still there. If that happened to the Bribery Commission, we can't give bribes. Bribery Commission can't give bribes. Just think about the plight of the average home builder. Just see after meeting the ministers, they ministers speak very high when they come to public platform. We are for the anti-corruption. They make big stories. But when it comes to practical reality, this is the way that we are being treated. Right? So then, as you said, what is the best way to minimize the anti-corruption? What are the best preventive mechanisms that you can take? This time, the Bribery Commission has been given powers like the Hong Kong Anti-Corruption Commission, Bhutan, Malaysia. They can look at each and every government department about their procedures. If these procedures allow the parties to commit bribery and corruption, they can be asked to strengthen plug those loopholes. The bribery commission has that power. In order to execute that power, bribery commission need people of your caliber. Otherwise, bribery commission may not be able to give direction to government department. So that is why we have to minimize eye-to-eye contact, as you said. We have to have all these businesses online. Just see how the passport department is functioning now. I think less corruption. If you want to get a passport within 24 hours, that's a mechanism. You can pay additional amount and get a passport. But on the other hand, in the same country, see another government department, Department of Motor Traffic. See the smile that you have. Department of Customs. So that is the will, that is the leadership of each and every government department. We need to have a quality leaders, not the paper qualifications, who have the will and the capacity to make that change. Who have the will and the capacity to make that change. That is very important, prevention. So now I was talking about corruption. In order to be a successful investigator, we need to know what is AR, administrative rules, financial rules. There may be loopholes in those systems. If there are loopholes, what you should do, you have to rectify and bring new regulations. That is why most of the corruption cases fail. There is not a single judgment in the Supreme Court with regard to corruption. In other countries, how many judgments are there for younger generation to learn? I have been a teacher at the law college, law faculty, on criminal procedure and criminal evidence. I have never taught anything related to bribery and corruption. Why? It is not there in their curriculum. Without having such subjects taught at law college and law faculties, we expect to have a generation of lawyers and judges who are well equipped with anti-corruption. This is a good learning for you. When you have your ethical guidelines, when you have other procedures, train the younger generation of your profession, right? With regard to the anti-corruption values, with regard to the integrity values, that must be there in your calendar. Coming back to the corruption investigations, it is very often the question is asked, no, in Parliament, before the several committees, the Auditor General, he submits reports. The Auditor General submits reports. Then you can say, oh, he says no, there is so much loss to the government. Why can't you rely on those reports and prosecute? When you ask the Auditor General to come and assist us, at least come and give a statement, they run away. They never want to be cited in the bribery commission. With all due respect, they are very scared of going before the witness box. Because in the eyes of law, the most corrupt person in the eyes of law is presumed to be innocent. The prosecution has to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. How do you prove the case beyond reasonable doubt? During the course of the investigation, you have to collect the evidence that is admissible in a court of law. Now, in the report of the Auditor General merely finds out the lost cost to the government. They are not finding out who is responsible, which officer is responsible. So by going through the documents, you have to identify which officer is responsible. That is the most difficult task. Why? Our regulations and the circulars are not clear enough. So that is the offense of corruption. Then this time we have an electronic asset declaration system. The public servants are still giving their annual asset declaration by way of manual submission. Hereinafter, we have discussed with the World Bank and the Swiss authorities. We have prepared, in fact, electronic asset declaration form with the support of the government authorities. So therefore, you will send your asset declaration where? To a special directorate in the bribery commission. Even the president has to send there. Otherwise, what will happen? When you send to each and every government head, those are lost sometimes, not available for investigation. On electronic form, you have to send there. If you don't send, we give a 1 month grace period. Then there will be a surcharge for that 1 month. Salary equivalent to 1 month will be surcharge if you don't give. For the second month also, if you don't give, we don't file cases. Salary 6 times your 1 month salary will be surcharged. If you don't do the second time only, third time, you will be prosecuted. So likewise, you will get acknowledgement for the system, and the general public is allowed to get an edited version of my asset declaration. My privacy is protected. Certain information will be there. I have 4 lands in Colombo, 1 land in Jaffna. Basic information will be given to the general public. Why? Then the general public can complain, no, he has another land in down south. Because we are a country, we know more than our home, we know what is happening in our neighbor's house. So they are vigilant. So they are always keep an eye on my home. So no problem of receiving petition and other things from our neighbors. So we have a strong asset declaration system. Now, what are the new features that we have introduced in the new offenses we have introduced? We have introduced a new offense called conflict of interest. That is the root cause. That is the root cause for corruption and bribery. That means if I am going to take a decision with regard to a client, with regard to a member of a general public who comes before me, if that person is known to me, socially related, monetary wise, or I'm going to have a connection with him in the near future if I know that, or I don't have a connection now, but there's a perception in the social media that I have a connection with him. What should I do? I should not take any decision. I must immediately report to my supervising officer. Let him appoint another person to take this task. If you don't do that, what will happen? If you don't do that, it has been made a criminal offense. So the conflict of interest is there. So when it comes to engineers, so far now I have talked about how your services can be given. But there are instances, not the members who are in this audience, who are the perpetrators of the bribery and corruption. Who are the perpetrators? Why? When you have a wide discussion, even you don't have guidelines, how to use that discussion, that is where corruption starts. That is where bribery commences. So therefore, when you are called upon to approve a particular specifications, and after the contract, if you are required to examine whether the particular building was done according to standards, and if you don't do that, what will happen? If you don't do that, that will happen, that will definitely cause serious repercussion to our development. So therefore, engineers, you have to have your integrity system intact. Each and every government department relating to engineers, you must have a institutional anti-corruption plan. You must have an integrity officer in your office. His duty is to see these loopholes and try to come out with a strategy, new anti-corruption plan under the Right to Information Act. That's a very, very useful tool that has been given to the general public. They can get any information from any government department. So therefore, when you have such thing, if you are transparent, then general public would know engineers related to these particular organizations and their integrity is very high. So that is how the engineers can contribute to the anti-corruption system in this country. So then we have introduced a new offense called sexual bribery. Sexual bribery, there are several. That means that gratify a sexual flavor has been introduced as one of the forms of sexual gratification. So now, then we have introduced private sector bribery. What do you mean by private sector bribery? We'll assume there are two competing engineering bodies. They are competing for a bid. What happened? Company A, competing A, he gets hold of a procurement officer in company B and gives a bribe to him. So what happened? Company B puts a higher bid. Company B loses the bribe, loses the tender. Company A gets the tender, but their quality is very low. Their professionalism is low. Ultimately, what happened? The investor will get a very low quality building. Maybe a few years later, it might even collapse. See how the private sector bribery will have an impact on our national economy. When you say private sector bribery, we can't touch, we don't have the practical capacity go after each and every private sector institutions. So we have selected only high end of the private sector, means those companies who have been listed in the share market. Those are the companies who are involved in private sector bribery. Then we have introduced sports corruption, conflict interest I told. Trade in influence means not only the public servants, even if you are not a public servant, if you accept a bribe with the promise that I will get this work done from the government department, that is basically called a trade in influence. So then money laundering means that people have so much money, they can't explain. Now they convert this black money to looks like clean money. And if you can't explain those money, those are called money laundering. One area we have not included at this juncture is the Proceeds of Crime Act. How to recover stolen assets. It's too much to introduce these things in one piece of law. There's a separate committee. Now they are looking into this proceeds of crime. Maybe in few months' time, we will be able to finalize the draft, probably next year. So then we will discuss those aspects. So therefore, what I have discussed, I think my 20 minutes have gone. So therefore, I will stop. Main thing is, we have a new anti-corruption act. We have made it statutorily independent. They have the resources to human resources they want. Then we have introduced new procedures. We have whistleblower protection. Those things are there. And therefore, we need engineer support. Maybe as investigator, as commission, as a preventive officer, or even as a perpetrator, not to commit these offenses in time to come. Thank you so much for the opportunity. That was good.
Yeah, thank you very much, President Council, Sarat Jayaman. I think it was very interesting, like a keynote speech in this series. Right? Thank you very much for that. And you compare this Singapore and Sri Lanka, and also you discuss about the independence of Anti-Corruption Commission, and you invited the engineers to join the Anti-Corruption Commission as, or maybe on contract basis. And also there is something that you mentioned about this institute-wise anti-corruption plan. Maybe ISL can also have one anti-corruption plan, right? So with this one, that I would like to invite all these three presenters to the stage, along with the ISL president, to have a discussion. Can you please, the resource persons and the ISL president, please come to the stage. So we'll start the discussion now, right? So. We'll start with Professor Priyan Das, right? As a senior engineer and a person who has done a lot of work or studies on these subjects. So can you please elaborate on the role of the institution, that is the ISL, on this?
So, I mentioned what was that the institution of the buffer between the people engineers who are like for their functions and the repercussions they face. So, and that's not only true of and what was the experiment for that phase that we need responsibility to the party. When individual engineers want to take different decisions, they are not given support to, I don't know, maybe something the audience might have the idea.
Okay, shall we forward it? Yes, in charge.
Related to I take up most of maybe I can put a lot of different things like that. Cannot put me a further remark. As he's right, I must mention that he has been, as you see that today, throughout his career in campus as well as today, he showed his ease of explaining will completely into a very basic manner for us to understand. Unfortunately, if I don't have remark, I lost my father very early in the day. I was brought up by my mother, who was a teacher, a strict disciplinarian. So I can't do that consistent words and use. So my mind works only done on direction. Because I want to reach you, but I just go to a group of professionals this morning, trying to encourage them to come today to the IELTS. All these members in that group who are 250 or 300 are all IELTS members. And who will be today? That will be. So please permit me to read this form because it gives a lot of insight to most of the things that you say. The one, I copied the post given sent by today, and I will this one. Many things happened this week because I know complex questions this week. Alas, we celebrate anti-corruption day at highway. Alas. If there is anyone sensitive on corruption, I trust the speakers will be fine. Please attend and show our faith against corruption. I say a lot of it. Is the only thing sensitive and interested to join the first anti-corruption day in Nairobi. Last week, there was hardly time for us to organize the anti-corruption. To say these for these people who are not really, yeah, they can't do that. Why is it I keep on right to my colleagues who was there 300, all professionals, most of them are. Why I raised the depression corruption in my corruption term? I refer to in my book. I don't remember. That's what I do. If I see corruption, and if I don't speak again, means to me, my another phrase, right?
means to me, I tonight. If I don't speak against corruption, I mean I tonight. Maybe I'm wrong. I like to be a part of. I'm trying to encourage this kind of couple. Now this, someone tell about this, you are talking about the empathy or the buffer. By the person. Now this is the person experience I'm supporting my friends again. One day a young engineer called me during the trouble in for. He apologetically asked me if they could come home to meet. Why that many people avoided. I agree. Not even knowing what he wanted to. He came and stayed with the entire heart. He was working with his superior, was constantly in the habit of making. And I know that. This from my own life, you have to let it go. He may. He could not, he could bear no more. He had tried his best. He told me even his superior, the other superior, officer of the law. When he could do it, I spent a good couple of hours with him and advised him what to do. Not sure, but I saw very reason. Saying more now, to down. And that's the time. Calling for another very appeal, calling for the just but then go and show and go to whatever I is trying to do. When he tries to go to the morning, which is the result, no unexpected. Salam. 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 Then I want to trade on something that happened with me. I was attending the parliament oversight committee 2 days ago. No kind of content or whatever. At that meeting, that was kind of the civil result. Some of the audience brought up to the slide. And it was post by the government minister, this is being discussed today. Follow. Well, the government minister releases the website it says, the Sri Lanka Electricity Act is gazetted on 5th of December. The date of 7th of December. To date, on 7th of December, the printer has not even received the draft. It appeared at 3 AM on the 8th. Now, they are very many legal remedy. Who is that for? Whom are we trying to hold reform? Then I read two comments, right? You mentioned about the NPC of India. Now that tell me when the NPC of me, all the potential book, by whom? The politicians. Nobody dares approach the NPC, but they are having lobbies and lobbies and lobbies, trying to print up that case and try to make the case the NPC. That's not something. That's waiting. And they have been drilled. NPC drilling the politician. Why do you want to do this? What is the reason? We have the council and the freedom. Right? It's I'm trying to read. I'm thinking around the question. The judgment was the right? The case initially 2007, judgment was given in 2023. So I'd like to have a word about it. Now, that what of the case, 3 people died to carry pride. 2007, that was not given on 3rd of December. Thank you very much. Sorry for it. Start with that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. For everyone, I think if you ask me questions, you have to be very, very specific. And because, we have a strict, time frame for this discussion, we plan to actually, the initial plan was to finish it by 11:30, now it's almost 12. So if there are any other questions, wait, so the discussion was that we will go on, but please be specific. Please introduce yourself and also just raise your hand.
And Philip. Yeah, I want to find out when you do the common law, the accounting of the but constitution says, secretary has to carry out the instructions given by the minister. Is there a process to overcome the situation? Is the, this is a very silly situation. Is there any process in the anti-corruption act to overcome this situation? Thank you.
Secretary has to carry out only the legal orders given by the minister. With regard to the government policy.
Tell me how it is meeting.
Law. This is a basic principle in law. No public officer is bound to carry out illegal orders. That is basic. Maybe whoever the senior is, juniors are not bound to carry out illegal orders. They can say straight away, this is in violation of the rules, regulation, and if I were to carry out this, I am committing the offense of corruption. If you don't say, then it is not a defense for him to say that I have been instructed by the minister. So it is the duty of the public official to put down in writing. If he has got illegal orders, put down in writing in the file that on certain day, then and then immediately you want to note down. It is not an excuse because nowhere, as Vijaya said, nowhere the ministers have been given powers for the recruitment or any projects, they have not been involved. It is with the particular individual or official who has to carry out that function.
Technical PC company and the government company. They will not want to involve in the right or the subject. Like, I just want to maybe engineer can see that when we are involved in the construction, maybe engineer can see the company of the company of the company staff, engineer can see. If the direction of that, maybe conservation or something is being, so maybe support the guidelines. Maybe support for the good quality and the guidelines. So it's a commitment.
We do understand your question. After you are saying that the person should not take a bribe, that's clear. Yes, part of it, yeah, okay.
Take back. So maybe engineer can understand, engineer can say, you know, you can, so then the work, can be the work. So maybe, engineer can see some weakness. Maybe some, so then, for the direction of that weakness, starting to the consultant speed, not the prime. So that is not that.
Engineer makes a technical contribution to the contractor and then goes recompense for his time and expertise here.
So that is not, I get to the conclusion. You cannot be paid for I am just very student. So I am very grateful to India and I would like to thank I able to organizing this kind of instruction event and especially to our Chinese local there and engineer and Mr. Saraswati. Thank you for your full sharing. So as I just congratulate about them the corruption is coming from the complicated like it seems like India trying to others the lecture or it's like when we are being some assignment from others, they are doing the point the corruption will begin. And that's why very serious when it is yeah. You are taking the subject like engineering development and we are learning about the ideas, ethics and so but in the practice, we don't see much things very things like hand like if the people are reaching the so this particularly we don't know. So we can see like we are in the bad side of the picture, like who are in the corruption and all this, but we don't see the people who are in the right thing. So if suddenly that we go over to like some kind of thing, and we go over to the then we will proceed and progress and recognition of the spirit. I think that another problem that we have because like from the childhood, people like parents are looking into like I think like someone other compare with others like that. So I think there also might be on the other hand as a professional body, if you can like progress what kind of legal system that you have been adapted to like mediate the corruption, then I think related to be more moderated, not to do this on the end.
Okay, so thank you for that, those comments, and they were addressed that, but, yes, now, actually, institution of India, when you go to already, programs, there are a lot of the panels, like, so there are the presentation board also, wants to highlight this teaching of ethics, right? I think maybe the presentation board, I was chairman, maybe presentation board, but, maybe institution as a whole can be a bit more creative with the way that, this ethics is taught. Like you correctly say, maybe, the teaching can involve, students' behavior itself, rather than just, I mean, case studies are really important, case studies will be in practice. But case studies of, behavior within, the student community may also help towards ethical formation. Okay, but that is something we will get to.
See, in the comments, all are that's all that we do. Where there is a respect of we doing like that. That's what instruction. One person said, for our economic. Potential. Igneous water is inside when I think of it, that basically part is true. Because it's most of the project have had as the ideas are in as I remember, on a major highway to the back. We can look at like it, there was some switch. But that is not big one from communication. Then one year was over, very regular company. Here over. And on the bridge, they received the postal cable to move together. Because that is also one way of being, work, don't say now, country. But the police doesn't say, because the very honorable are very clear. Doesn't say, no, very important game of outside. It's a prime concern of the. They were going to be like on the road with the game inside the. Team. But then, police are very in the role of also. Police are from the country. Very much about what they want pressure. They want to respect that country, from that country, and they change the population because still and remain that. Yeah. And by majority because the parents people of the country. But you are today that completely considered now, but that because constructed, not the forces in the outside of the. But second higher in the fourth have the center out, but because care because of security. So what I want to emphasize is that engineers can stand out and be guided by our ethics and build that trust.
Prepare our payroll. Production for example, because prepare previous government, they was terminated by the other government. One of the mechanisms to be able to suggest in order to prevent such a situation. We have both of them project both participate with the higher officials. The next official will have to participate with the level.
I have dreams that I have.
I would like to stay for a while. Please, there is a small token of appreciation to our resource person, Engineer Nishanka Vijayaratna. So I would like to invite the president, Professor Sandeep Disana. So we would like to thank you. We appreciate your presence actually. Yeah, please raise your phone. Did you raise your phone?
Can I just, our, that point about that, so is there any, legal impediment to using of things like that in educational voting? Are there secret or will there be violation of legal? So because people will learn about this ethics only largely through these kind of exam cases. So long as the transaction is not pending, I don't see any objection in the system. By the way, I want to mention you, whatever the secret clauses you have, whatever the contractual obligations you have, when the private commission want you to divulge each and everything, you are legally bound to divulge to private commission. You can't look forward as a defense and contractually and not bound to divulge these information. That is not a defense. Under the new law, whatever the secret code, whatever the private contract you are with other party, that is not a taboo when you want, when the private can ask you to do something. I think there is number that about the data, but it's not mentioned, right? Yeah, like in the article, there are safeguards to prevent the cancellation of media division, especially it's a good one. Are there anything in
No harm, it will evit the government position. When the governments are paid, then if the contract has already given, of course, they can file a case. Those who have won the case, they can file a case here, or they can go to the international arbitration and file it out the case. I think they have to go home, they can file arbitration.
but like our president was, these cases take a long time.
That's a very big question.
I think next first one was engineer Hudson.
Yeah, I learned that this treatment of recover on the dumping army in danger. How we put this, remove the pollution, that is pollution, and we take the action of proceeding of the, authority, or not take the action of delay that is something that, there is a lot of, process to property and the so instead, action can be taken against because the agency they are this can at any time can against the can at one thing. Other one is the according to this some presentations, yes, we have some projects like LR, identification of like that. So there is a national policy of the all in the about the guidelines given in the national policy of evaluation this type of projects in the economy we are using a lot because of that the LRT project is of 0.1% of this that we are looking. So we have lost that funding that goes to the Bangladesh. So is there a possibility to take action against this?
I will ask the first question. We have to understand. You might see so many things around us. Just because so many things will happen as you can't hide private or corruption case to each and everything. In the defense of corruption, there are ingredients of corruption. Then there has to be evidence, not the evidence what you say. Evidence has to be there to fit into the ingredients of corruption. There has to be a decision taken by someone with a criminal mind. Then you have not have proof beyond reasonable doubt. Just because we see a garbage or something, whether it was not harm because those are administrative. Right in corruption, if they have conduct investigation into criminal offense. Otherwise, what will happen? The entire country will have to be run by private. That's not the politicians will remain silent. Doctors, engineers will remain silent, let the private institutions are the contract. They can't do that. They are not administrative. They want to come to the picture. When someone complains to private, they will investigate for that particular offense, then the evidence is there.
Engineer Hudson.
Very much organized with this activity. Also, participated, I also wrote that I will not be able to park my vehicle in the morning because of the crowd. Fortunately, a lot of parking places are. We explain, I'm also very sad about our presence of number of vehicles here. And apart from that, what I'm asking is regarding this question regarding illegal orders must be carried out by duty. Right, even the secretary or whoever orders, but in practical situation, if you want to change the situation, to establish the situation, we must have a kind of such a situation to go such employee or whoever duty to go and complain that if their issue is not able to go out of the job unemployed. So as you know, most of the projects now we are going on the project base. They recruit on project basis, it's a contract basis. So they depend on
maybe at the end of the first year, you have to go home. So unless for the public and state sector employees who are report somewhere, they can't go to the human rights and wait for so many years, spend so much of money. So no one will do. I think there must be a mechanism. So those, not only those, we can go to the place, the government or whatever the enforcement, so that they can stop. Unless you don't do that, all these top level both is the government one, because before when we are going in 1980, now it is 200 times corrupted officials. That is the way. Although we blame the politicians, officials are 100 times corrupted. And now unless you establish such a mechanism, we can't never expect that junior or whoever to act as to take according to it.
Even second card,
You are to the point, is by that only 20 minutes. I did not explain each and everything that you can on that. That you have this question.
is there any permission?
There is a provision in the Anti-Corruption Act that is called whistleblower protection. If you complain against any corruption related matter to your seniors, or if you complain to the Tribunal Commission, thereafter you should not be taken for task. There should not be revenge be taken. You should not be transferred out. There should not be any pressure. And if you do that, it's a criminal offense. The Tribunal Commission can investigate into that matter and file a case. So section 74, 75, 76 of the new Anti-Corruption Act, those provisions are there. You can just look at those.
So it's already, yeah, 12:15, right? So one more question. Yeah, okay. That may be the last question then. So, okay. Thank you.
I just want to know that created that how that you see the different areas in contract and employer too. But during the implementation, it has to be good from and the other they might be the different. It may be not correct. Well, what can we do in that situation? Not technical. Technical matter is good.
So my opinion is those gray areas should be clarified before awarding, I think. So that is, yeah. Yeah. Gray areas, yes.
Yeah. That is the awareness and the understanding of the
So, yeah, before conclusion, shall I invite the president of the ISL, Professor Ranjit Dissanayake, to give away this token of appreciation to Professor Priyan Dias? Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Dias, for your valuable insights. And then the next token of appreciation is to the President Council, Mr. Sarath Jayamanne. Thank you very much, Mr. Jayamanne. So with this one, I would like to invite the Executive Secretary and the CEO of the ISL, Engineer Neil, to present the vote of thanks or propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Professor Nagavan. Good afternoon, Professor Priyan Dias, Emeritus Professor, University of Moratuwa, Engineer Nishanka Wijeyaratne, Secretary General and CEO of the CCI, who has just left, Mr. Sarath Jayamanne, President Council, Engineer Professor Ranjit Dissanayake, President of ISL, Engineer Professor Udeni Nawagamuwa, our moderator today, past presidents, council members, members of the institution, secretary, staff members, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, those who are joining online as well. So my privilege as the CEO of the ISL to deliver the vote of thanks at the World Anti-Corruption Day program organized by the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka for the first time. First, let me express my sincere gratitude to our speakers today, Professor Priyanda S., Emeritus Professor, University of Moratuwa, Engineer Nisanka Wijeratna, Secretary General, CEO of CCI, and Mr. Salat Jayamanna, President's Council. On behalf of the institution, thank you for your accepting our invitation to join us today and for making an eye-opening presentation about corruption in the country and how we can prevent it. I hope that many of us have much to learn from you. Past president of the institution, your wisdom, guidance, and continuous monitoring are a blessing for the institution to achieve milestones. The institution highly appreciates all of your assistance, and we thank you for raising this occasion. President and council members, thank you for your direction and initiatives. You are the main pillars of the ISL, and it is with your support that we could organize such an event. Further, I would like to thank our organizer of this event, Engineer Professor Udeni Nawagamuwa, along with Engineer Dr. Kamal Laksari, who is not present today due to some other commitments, for their dedication to organize this event on such a short notice. By the way, very much appreciate and support given by Engineer Gunawardena, the Deputy Executive Secretary, and the staff of the IAS. My thanks should also go to the technical support team and the IT division of the institution. On this World Anti-Corruption Day, let us reflect on the impact of corruption on our society and renew our commitment to combating this menace. We must recognize that the fight against corruption is not the sole responsibility of the government institutions, but requires the active involvement of every citizen. Thank you very much of all of you, and please pardon me if I missed someone during my word of thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we conclude the Anti-Corruption Day program. Thank you very much for coming.